Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
Hello and welcome back to the Blockchain Show. I'm your host, Ethan Kinderconnect, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Ed DeLeon. Thanks for being here today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
This is kind of an interesting time on this show. The last few weeks, we've been talking a lot about kind of world events, cryptocurrency, how it's being embraced on the world stage. And I forgot to mention that you're the founder and CEO of Anatha. Ed, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to be working in this line of technology?
You know, everyone arrives to crypto in their own way. I did it through the financial side. I grew up in the shadow of Wall Street, have a long history working in finance and accounting. And to me, crypto, it was the merger of two things I really loved, which was technology and finance. So for me, it was a natural fit. And it just so happens that what was a natural fit for me happened to be the fastest growing industry on the planet. So I was very lucky. I was an early adopter. I bought my first Bitcoin at 14 cents. I participated in basically all the major ICOs of last market cycle, which was between 2013 and 2017. And I benefited tremendously from it. And from that benefit, I've been able to launch an organization that was focused on the things that I thought were important in the industry, specifically social good. That's what brought me to crypto and brought a lot of people to crypto in the early days, was this idea of banking the unbanked and getting people access to meaningful financial tools. It just, at the time, it resonated so strong. And then that sort of seemed to fade during the ICO craze of the 2016 era. And I wanted to bring that back. I wanted to really put an emphasis on the things that brought me to the industry in the first place. And that's what Anatha is an expression of. It's a company focused on social good, specifically creating a self-sustaining UBI is the thing that I'm most excited about. We believe we've cracked the code. We found things that are already being monetized, such as your attention and engagement, and found ways to tokenize it in such a way where we're redistributing the tokens back to end users. And so in a way, we're sharing the value that their attention and engagement generates. So that's what excites me the most. I think crypto has opened up the door to solve some really old, sticky problems, and generating a universal basic income is certainly one of the things that it gets me up in the morning. So, if you're wondering what drives me, it's that. It's how do we use advances in information science to create a self-sustaining UBI, which I believe is already happening now. We're really just waiting for mass adoption at this stage.
UBI, that's something that we've talked about on the show before. I've had interesting conversations with friends and family about it. Depending on what part of the country I'm in at the time, there's kind of a different mindset onto whether or not it's a good idea. I personally think it's a great idea.
All the data suggests it's a great idea. There's anyone who says it's not a good idea hasn't been looking at the data. This is one of those things where people have a general opinion that somehow it's a bad idea to give poor people money. And I would assert that those people have never been poor who believe that. That's one place to start off. Speaking as someone who has been poor, who was born very poor, my mom was an immigrant. She actually is someone who had fled slavery in her nation and came to the United States. And I grew up about as poor as a human being can be in a first world nation. And I could tell you right now that direct giving, like giving money to people who need it the most, is one of the most beneficial things we could do for society. Ironically, it's also the thing that produces the most tax revenue. This is the part that everyone wants to leave out when we talk about UBIs, is that it's actually good for the government. The government makes more money by giving poor people money than it does in almost anything else it does. If you look at the tax revenue generated from SNAP benefits, that is to say the food stamp program, it is the single most profitable thing the government does, and yet it's the thing that they deride constantly. Investing in big companies, subsidies, hundreds of billions of dollars, no problem, even though it generates zero tax revenue. The companies that receive these big subsidies, they don't pay taxes, right? By and large, as we're discovering. But it's poor people who, if you give them money and they actually spend it on consumption, that is to say, they're buying goods and services in their local community, well, that's great for governments, right? Especially local governments. And it calculated that for every dollar invested in SNAP, it produces about $1.75 in tax revenue. Now, if I found an investment where I could put in $1 and get back $1.75, obviously we would make that investment quite often. But the government's reluctant to make that investment, so crypto is going to have to fill that role, right? We live in a world in which there is two generations existing simultaneously. There's the children of the atomic age, i.e., the boomers, our parents, or grandparents in some cases, and then there's the millennials, people born 1980, which is the year I was born, and after, right? So those two groups are from entirely different ages. And I think it sounds perhaps maybe even glib to mention that, but it's extremely important in that there's a cultural divide here in which people from the older generation see this idea of like hard work is the American way. And if you get anything for free, that was probably bad for you, right? Like somehow they think that they live in a world of scarcity in which in order for us to give poor people money, they legitimately think we need to go in their pocket and take money out, which I think is an important distinction. It's just not true. It's not how money works. It's not how finance works. It's certainly not how the U.S. economy works. And yet, for some reason, people think that in order for you to help others, that you somehow have to harm them. That is to say, they look at the money going into welfare programs, they look at the money going into social safety nets, and they go, "Who's going to pay for that?" As if that somehow they were going to have to go in their pocket and pay for it. And that's been a narrative that's existed my whole lifetime, right? This is something that I think they generated as a means for combating the Red Scare, right? This idea of socialism being a bad thing. I think they've gotten it so off now that they really can't right the ship, right? The government can't really have a meaningful conversation around this stuff because they're so used to socialism for corporations, which is in the form of subsidies, and rugged capitalism for the rest of us, right? We had social Darwinism for individuals, but socialism for corporations is kind of the way U.S. economic policy has shaken out. And I just think it's exactly backwards. And I think it's a result of those two ages. It's children of the information age. That's crypto, right? That's us saying that everyone should have access. You shouldn't have to give up all of your personal information just to do a financial transaction. And more importantly, you shouldn't need personal information to do a financial transaction, right? That's what crypto facilitates. That's the thing that gets me really excited, is this idea of a new personhood. The idea that anyone, anywhere, whether they have a birth certificate, a social security card, driver's license, or passport, even without any of that, they could still get access to the financial realm, is very important. Because only it's roughly about 1.7 billion people could pass through what we identify as KYC AML compliance, which means there's a 6+ billion people on the other side of that can. And that's who crypto is servicing. That's the real market, if you ask me. And that's what I spend most of my days thinking about, is how to service that market. How can I help the people that need help the most? Not necessarily simply because it's altruistic, mind you, though, but because it's sound economic advice. It's the best thing we can do as a civilization, is focus on the lower rung of the ladder, which in this day and age is hard, right? Everyone's going to space and talking about the metaverse. So if you want to have a conversation around doing meaningful things that actually help people, it almost gets drowned out, right? There's almost like a cartoonish thing happening with the wealthy in the West, where they're building penis-shaped rockets to shoot themselves into space while people starve in the streets. We lose 9 million people every year to hunger and hunger-related disease, right? And so while that's happening, and 9 million in a good year, by the way, we lost 18 million in 2020, according to some data I've seen. Either way, the number obviously went up, right? So while that's happening, and while people with access to capital are getting wealthier and wealthier because the Federal Reserve, with its quantitative easing, is not turning that off anytime soon, right? They printed more money in October of 2020 than the entire combined history of the United States up to September of 2020. It's difficult to overstate how off the rails we've gone in our economy and in our general thinking around the way an economy should work. And I think crypto and the idea of money as a product is our exit door to that entire game, to that whole racket, right? This idea that we should allow a small group of people to control our entire financial livelihood, our entire economic sort of path that we go, not just as individuals, but as a civilization, is just flawed thinking. And again, that's children of the atomic age. To children of the atomic age, it's natural that you would just give a single person tremendous power. right? You would just say, well, I don't want to be responsible for this, so let's make that guy over there responsible for, say, our entire economy or our entire energy grid or whatever responsibility you're trying to dole out at that time. And that seems rational to them, but to us is wildly irrational, right? They're like, can we have a debate? Where's the democratic process? What can we arrive at that would give us a better result than whatever's happening right now? And crypto as a project, or money as a product, crypto specifically, opens up the door for new thinking in an area that we just weren't allowed to have any thinking whatsoever. So that's why I'm excited about it. It's certainly why I've devoted my life to it. And I certainly think that's part of why it is receiving some of the energy it has in the market right now. It's the top performing asset class in the world. I still laugh every time people say, but I don't believe in crypto, is like a thing that comes up every now and then. It's kind of like saying you watched a team play and win. It's like, when the Bulls were on their like 6-year winning streak, with 6 championship in a row, and be like, I don't believe in the Bulls. It's like, they don't need your belief, right? The crypto doesn't need your belief. Everyone at home who thinks that they want to have a debate about whether crypto is real or not, crypto does not need your belief, right? Like, crypto is doing just fine. The question is, where do you fit in? And more importantly, what's possible on the other side of all this, right? So that's what gets me excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. 14 cents, man. That's really good.
Yeah, I always laugh. I've been part of 61 crypto projects at this point in my career, right? Like joining open source communities and throwing money at projects, whatever. But the thing that everyone always cares about is how early I bought Bitcoin. That's why I just started saying it, because it's true. I did buy Bitcoin at 14 cents. And before anyone wants to pat me on the back about it, just know that I lost it all to a computer being destroyed that was storing the private keys at the time, because we didn't really have advanced private key management back then. And like a lot of early crypto market participants, I did that thing where I lost private keys at some point in time. So somewhere on a landfill, there's a hard drive with a few hundred Bitcoin sitting on it that I bought at 14 cents. Right? So everyone, though, in the early days of crypto has some story like that. We all have like very hard lessons that we eventually will turn into businesses later, right? I lost my private keys. Now I spend a lot of my time building tools that make private key management easier.
Yeah, that certainly will. I guess that's one silver lining there. I see some of the newer emerging altcoins, and it's funny because when they hit over like a dime or so, I'm like, oh man, I missed out. But then it's like, no, I didn't. It's still not even too late to get back into Bitcoin or Ethereum. I mean, these things are just, I think if people are in it for the long term, I mean, there's just huge potential for growth. And for a while there, I was solely supporting projects that I believed in, or maybe I talked to them on the podcast. I liked what they're doing. And then I got really into staking, and I'm not putting a whole lot of money in because unfortunately I don't have much expendable income. So maybe like $10 a week here or there. Man, I'll tell you, like in the last 5 years, it's been really exciting to see some of these technologies take off.
Well, I think you said it, 5 years is the right window, right? Because cryptocurrency has a 4-year market cycle that I don't think most people are aware of, or if they are, they only kind of like vaguely allude to it. But the truth is, there's been a market cycle that's engineered into Bitcoin. And since most cryptocurrencies are still pegged to Bitcoin, or that Bitcoin's energy still kind of drives the market, that the whole industry has this 4 or 5 year cycle that I think if people understood would have a much more balanced and sort of steadfast approach to what we might call investing, right? Like when you're putting your economic inputs into a system, whether it's Bitcoin or some new thing that's emerged, you're essentially saying that you want the outcomes that that system is designed to create. In the case of Bitcoin, you might be like, the reason I'm giving Bitcoin money or my time and attention is because I want sound money, something that is open and transparent with a fixed supply, ideally a deflationary supply, to exist. And I think that should exist, right? So when you bet on Bitcoin, that's essentially what you're betting on. But what people are doing now is they're not really investing. They're just speculating. It is a big problem that most people that come to me are like, how can I just, what's the latest meme coin that I could put money into that will go up 300% in the next 30 days, right? That's what most people are looking for. And that's a mistake, right? Like that's a trap. What you should be doing is thinking in long-term macro perspective on crypto at all time. Right, I've been through 3 market cycles now. Right, as it says, I've been with crypto long enough where I've seen it do this 4-year pattern multiple times, right? This will be the third time I'm watching it happen. And each time that happens, I generally increase my overall net worth dramatically. Basically, every market cycle I add a zero is what I do on average, right? And that's still not tracking the market. The market actually goes up by 20 or 30x. I'm happy if I get a 10x during any of these market cycles. But once you start to take this wider perspective, right, where you're not trying to extract value from the market in the next 30 minutes or the next 30 days or even the next year, but instead saying, well, how can I ride this 4-year cycle in such a way where I'm reaping the most benefit with the least amount of work, right? Like when people come into crypto thinking they're going to be like a day trader or something like that, I often warn them off of that and just say, take a more macro perspective, slow down. Crypto is so volatile and jumps around all over the place in the short term that trying to track that is a fool's errand. But if you take a step back and look at it from the macro scale, suddenly it seems really reliable, right? When people talk about crypto volatility, they're talking about short-term volatility. Long-term, sure, it's still volatile, but it's generally volatile and trending in the right direction, right? It's volatile, but every 4 years, it's sitting at 10x of where it was sitting or 20x of where it was sitting in the last 4 years. Well, that's pretty reliable to me. So that's basically what I've been making bets on my whole career, and really just focused on tracking this larger macro perspective on crypto. And that's afforded me some luxuries. It's afforded me tremendous capital to build businesses or go after projects or make new investments. But more importantly, it's given me the space I needed and that broad perspective to figure out what should I be working on, right? And to me, when you take a step back and you look at crypto and you think of money as a product and all the innovation that's happening around decentralized finance and digital personhood, it makes sense to focus on things that are trying to help people, not simply from an altruistic standpoint. I often have to defend myself and say, like, I'm not charity, right? Like, we're giving money away to end users, but we're not charity. We're regenerative, right? We're self-sustaining. We're not saying like, hey, I need money from somewhere else so I could give it to this third party. What we're saying is we're creating systems that include people as partners, not products. And I think that's a really important distinction that the overall market's going to make in the future. Like, people are going to realize that they're the product on YouTube, that they're the product on Facebook, that they're the product at Google. And they may not like being that at some point in time. I think most people, when you really unpack it for them, they realize the unfairness of a company like Facebook profiting wildly from their intention and engagement and giving them nothing in return. I'm simply suggesting we need to cut them in. And I think the crypto projects of the future will have this kind of partnership perspective, right? It'll start to view the users of the platform not as fuel or not as the product, but instead view them as partners, as important to the existence of that platform, right? Like, Facebook can't exist if all the users leave tomorrow, right? Like Zuckerberg's empire collapses in on itself if people stop actually giving their attention and engagement to his tools. So what happens if the thing that owns the attention and engagement, the thing that is profiting from it, is not a corporation, not a profit-seeking corporation, but a decentralized autonomous organization that has no profit-seeking initiative, has no reason to seek profit, and therefore can share that value back with the end user. And that's what really crypto has opened up, is this idea of decentralized autonomous organizations providing utility to our society that we already use, whether it's Facebook or whether eventually it'll hopefully be our energy grid, banking and finance. These are all utilities that exist in our world. But what if they weren't provided by a profit-seeking private enterprise, right? What if it was instead owned by this public utility, a decentralized autonomous organization? Well, what happens then? What kind of civilization do you get when the things you're interacting with aren't trying to extract value from you at any time, right? They're simply there to provide a service or utility at the lowest possible price. Well, I think you get a much more efficient civilization to begin with. I think you'll have much higher velocity. I think money will flow around in it much better. But this is just ultimately what's possible. This is what Jeremy Rifkin talked about in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, where he talked about just having more data and information, more transparency will allow us to increase the efficiency of our civilization. And in doing so, unlock the next stage of the information age. That is to say, is by increasing efficiency, by increasing velocity of our economy, we can unlock human productivity and start to do really wonderful things, right? We're a very inefficient society, a very inefficient civilization. The height of human civilization gets about 20% of the energy from its economic inputs. That is to say, if it's working with a raw material, about 20% of the energy locked in that raw material will actually go towards a product or go end up in the economy. 80% of it's wasted. And we believe that we could get that number above 80%. That is to say, is we could be using over 80% of the energy and only less than 20% of it could be wasted. Well, we don't know what our civilization will look like at that point, right? Because what people need to understand is that lions, for example, if you think of lions as having a civilization, they are at about 9% economic efficiency when it comes to extracting energy from its environment. So when a lion kills an antelope and eats it, about 9% of that antelope goes into the lion and functions as energy and gets used for what we might call lion civilization, right? Well, human beings have been stuck at about 12 or 13% efficiency, right? There's just like a few percentage points difference between a wild animal and human civilization, right? So what happens when you increase that barrier, that difference between, what we were in our primitive state to say 80% efficiency? We're talking orders of magnitude higher. Well, I believe that's when we will actually touch the stars, right? We'll stop playing these games of, scratching around in the dirt or very wealthy private individuals building fancy toys that they could use to shoot themselves into the stars versus a meaningful space program that is has public support and is to the benefit of all of humanity and not simply, being built as a means for generating private wealth, such as like SpaceX, or what we might more aptly call monuments to their own egos, right? That right now, the space race feels like a big dick off, right? It feels like people basically saying like, I have the bigger, cooler spaceship than you. So it's wealthy people playing a funny game and teasing each other on Twitter while doing it. And I think it's shameful, right? I think for too long, we've left too much money and too much power in the wrong hands. And that we're at a crux in civilization now where we actually have the opportunity to fix some of these problems, right? We actually have the opportunity to start choosing systems that benefit us. And most of my work is just getting people to realize they have a choice, right? That part's the hard part, right? When you're onboarding people to crypto, when you're onboarding people to the future of the information age, they'll be very resistant to it, much in the way getting someone to switch religions might be very difficult, right? It's important to recognize money is kind of the national religion of the United States. And so when you start introducing new money, whether it's Bitcoin or some new stable coin or whatever's coming out, you're essentially asking people to abandon their religion. And it's a very difficult thing. It's something I've been doing for roughly 8 years now, right? Is onboarding people into the crypto world. And it's a very difficult task and not something that should be taken lightly. But when people do make the transition, well, I mean, obviously I'm speaking to most of the people listening to this will probably have already been converted. But once you realize the power and promise of distributed systems, decentralized currency, and cryptocurrency as a whole, it's hard to look away. And maybe that's just me, and maybe that's just a certain percentage of the population. But when you look at the size and scale of the problems you could solve by engineering new systems, new decentralized financial tools, new money, it starts to make some of the problems that seem unassailable, right? Like poverty or homelessness or wealth stratification suddenly become imminently solvable in this new system. And that's exciting. Imagine a world in which you could just leave behind the debt of the old system, where you're like, yeah, I owe millions of dollars in debt in the old fiat system, but no one uses that anymore, so who cares? Right? Right? You just move on to the new money, right? And I think that's what's becoming possible. I think people more and more, children of the information age are going to realize they get to write their own reality and they get to make choices that are meaningful to them. And choosing your money, I think, is probably one of the most important choices you can make in a lifetime, right? Choose the wrong money, you end up poor and homeless. Choose the right money, you end up wealthy and powerful. So what's it going to be, right? Don't you think that's one area that we should be pretty mindful about?
Oh, absolutely. It kind of reminds me of in Star Wars, The Mandalorian, when they're debating whether or not the old Empire credits have any value since the rebels took over.
Yeah, it's what can you get for it, right? We should probably talk about redemption, right? This is something that's going to confuse people about currency. Is a currency is worth what you could get for it, right? And by and large, the U.S. dollar is pegged to petroleum. That's why we call it the petrodollar, right? And the currencies of the future are not going to be backed on physical goods and services, right? There's this sort of natural instinct to try to tie something physical to something non-physical, right? Where you have this new abstraction of money, cryptocurrency, and you immediately like, well, could I attach it to an ounce of gold? How about a US dollar, right? It's essentially we're building horseless carriages again. We're looking at it and trying to tie it back to old technology. I think the currencies of the future will be pegged to information-backed goods and services, which is an important distinction that most people haven't made yet. And when I say information-backed goods and services, well, one of the easiest examples to understand is cell phone minutes, right? One of the lighthouses in the storm, something that we in the cryptocurrency industry, especially in the early days, looked to for guidance was the M-Pesa Project. And for those of you that are unaware, M-Pesa was a project in Kenya or in much of Africa where they had a digital currency that was backed by a cell phone minute. Now, they didn't really start off as a currency. It was literally just the ability to transfer cell phone minutes to one another is what they started with. And people realized that was a better currency than their regional currency because they understood the utility of a cell phone minute, right? If you understand the utility of the thing that's backing the currency, it's much easier to figure out how to trade with it. So if I know the utility of a cell phone minute, well, how many cell phone minutes does it take to get a haircut? How many cell phone minutes does it take to buy eggs, right? The market will figure this stuff out. And then once you've established pricing, well, then you could use that to run your economy. And M-Pesa, it was tremendous. They used a cell phone-backed currency, and it raised 9% of the Kenyan population out of poverty. There was 195,000 households. This was years ago. I'm talking about data that we got from MIT. I think it was back in 2016. We already saw that nation switching to non-national digital money was raising some of the poorest people in the country out of poverty. And that's fascinating, right? It's saying, so the moment you get away from money as a government sort of thing, right? Something that the government's allowed to do and no one else is allowed to do, and instead turn it into a competitive marketplace that the people who are consuming, the money users, generally tend to benefit. Right. And we know that competition is good for the market. And then we allow monopolies to exist in hyper important parts of our civilization, most notably money. And that's problematic. Right. And I get why that people think you need to only have one money because it gets confusing if you have more than one. But I'm here to tell you that the technology is going to manage that complexity for you. So the future is going to be fractal. That is to say, there's going to be many, many economies, or there already are many, many economies layered on top of each other, existing in the same geographic region, competing for your inputs. And that is a good thing because what will happen is users will generally gravitate towards whichever economic systems is most beneficial to them, which will largely be most beneficial to society. Right. And that's what a competitive marketplace allows for. It allows for competition, allows for choice. And finally, crypto as a product is saying, or money as a product, cryptocurrency is saying that this thing that has been fundamental to your life, money, this thing that you're willing to trade time, energy, and engagement for, is now a competitive marketplace. Now you could choose money that actually aligns with you. You could choose money that's doing things you believe in versus whatever your economic policy of the country you're living in. And maybe if you live somewhere nice like Switzerland, you don't really have a problem with their economic policy, right? You're saying like, oh, they're mostly using it for social programs and for helping people, versus the United States, where most of our newly created units of account go towards subsidies, right? They go to corporate subsidies for the defense industry, oil subsidies, private prison, right? Like, are you okay with your economic inputs being used to back private prison? I'm certainly not, right? Like I'm certainly not okay with that. And that's one of the reasons why I feel disenfranchised in the US economy. So if you feel disenfranchised, well, maybe it's time to choose something else, right? If you disagree with what your government does with its money, which is ultimately our money, maybe it's time to choose new money. And I think that's what the early days of crypto promised. It almost seemed like an impossible task. And I'll tell you a little anecdote. In the early days of Bitcoin, before it was $1, Everyone thought the moment Bitcoin hit $1 that we were done. That what we call dollar parity was the end goal for any cryptocurrency, was an assumption that many people in the market were making in the early days of Bitcoin. And as a result, when Bitcoin hit $1, I know many, many people that just sold all their Bitcoin. They had thousands and thousands of them. And the moment it hit $1, they were like, I'm selling. Good luck, losers, right? Like they kind of celebrated on their way out too when they were selling at $1 because it's money now, right? And then a few days later, it was like $8. And everyone was very confused, and we didn't realize that crypto by design, or Bitcoin by design, was going to continue to do this amazing ride where it was always going to be deflationary relative to US dollars. It's still going to take a while for people to realize what that means, right? And what that means in terms of market outcomes. But in the meantime, if you understand it and you're able to navigate the complexities of decentralized finance, the possibilities that have become available are almost unbelievable. Almost unbelievable. If you had grabbed like me in 2008 and told me that I was going to be, managing my own money or running a company, and that my returns were going to be some of the returns I've had in years past, where you're getting 3,000% APY on an investment, I would have laughed in your face, right? I would have told you I worked in finance during the 2008 crash. If you had told me that the next decade was going to involve money as a private product and you were going to be getting APYs on it that were cartoonish, I wouldn't have believed you, and rightfully so, right? But it's happened, and it's actually creating the largest transfer of wealth in human history. And I always say this in my talks, and I'm pretty sure people think I'm being hyperbolic when I say that. When I say that the transition from the last industrial age into the next will be an information age endeavor, and that transfer will constitute the largest transfer of wealth in human history as we move from the old systems into the new. That's not hyperbolic. That's happening in real time now. It is the fastest growing industry on the planet for that reason. And I think once people grok to that their ears perk up a little bit, right? Suddenly they're interested. The real problem right now are technical barriers. For most users, decentralized finance is not an option, right? And so a big part of the industry and a big part of the push is, how do we make it an option? How do we make it simpler? And we're seeing wallet manufacturers or developers work on that night and day. Certainly where we put a certain degree of our energy. And but as an industry, that's probably one of the most important battlefronts, is how do we make this stuff easier for everyone else? And we're certainly not there yet, but I feel like in the next 2 or 3 market cycles, we'll figure it out. As an industry, we'll figure out what are the user interfaces that allow grandma to get involved, right? That's what I always ask. How do you get grandma involved in crypto? When the incentive to get involved is so great that they don't have a choice, that's how you get that's how you get grandma involved, right? So, and for everyone, that's different, though, right? My threshold was like, as soon as Bitcoin was like over $100, I couldn't look away, right? I was like, it's just too exciting, and I think price is the least interesting indicator, but it is an indicator, right? It's an indicator that there's some energy being poured into the market. And once I realized that crypto was going to be as big as it is getting and going to continue to be, I became so fascinated by it that I had no choice. I'm obsessed with it, right? It's something that I look at every single day at least since 2013. I've been full time in the industry, and there hasn't been a day that's gone by where I haven't like memorized every chart of everything that I thought was important, or consumed all the information that's available in the market. And when something captures you like that, I think that's generally a good thing. I think I'm very fortunate in that I'm one of the people that have been able to become obsessed with crypto and was able to be a relative early adopter. But I think most people don't realize is that door is still open, right? I think you mentioned it earlier. People that when Bitcoin crosses a certain threshold, they feel like they're late. I think this 4-year cycle that we've been seeing, these epochs, might last for the rest of our lives. Right? There's at least some supposition, barring a flippening, like where Ethereum overtakes Bitcoin and the whole industry turns upside down, and suddenly we're on a new deflationary model. Until that happens, we will most likely see a 4-year cycle in crypto of some sort, where every 4 years there's supply shock, which causes price inflection, which causes this pattern that we've been seeing. Well, that's a great thing, right? That suddenly is something reliable in the market that you could base predictions on, and you could use that to navigate the the rest of your economic life. So I could be wrong on that, but so far so good, right? It's allowed me to be the CEO of a multinational technology company. We're a medium-sized company, but growing every day. And every market cycle, as I said, my own net worth increases dramatically, which gives me more power and more reach and more ability to launch things that are actually going to help people, right? Because at the end of the day, unless you're doing that last part, unless your system is actually helping people, what's the point? Like, why are we here, right? One of the big arguments I get in crypto is that everyone is speculating, right? Everyone's like, how do I make more money later? And I think they're missing the point entirely. I think it's not how do I have more money later? It's how do I navigate the environment in such a way where I have more spending power later, but I don't want more US dollars later. Does that make sense to you? You know, hopefully people listening at home understand that. Like, it's not about how do I get the most amount of US dollars. It's how do I improve my position so I can do the most amount of help? And improving your position generally means increasing spending power. And crypto is certainly great for that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It seems like there's three types of people I come across. It's like usually the type that, like you said, they either don't understand it or don't believe it. And then there's the type who are only in it for making a quick buck, speculating. And then every once in a while I'll find someone who really wants to talk about the revolutionary implications that the technology can bring to mankind. So,
well, we're seeing so much from the technology side that it's a little overwhelming. You know, there's a new proofing algorithm minted every day, it seems, and there's hundreds of projects emerging every month, and that could be a little overwhelming, right? It could be almost too much to take on. But if you're a geek like me, it's super fun, right? These are just other things to explore, and at least from an economic design standpoint, when I see projects come out, such as like a new algorithmic stablecoin, UST or Terra being my favorite, some of the stuff they're doing from a design perspective, some of the systems choices that they're making are fascinating and really, really beneficial to anyone who's participating in the project. And if you could understand how that will play out in the market, that's really valuable. But forget valuable, it's also just interesting. Right? It's interesting from a technological viewpoint of how these systems are self-sustaining, how they can exist, even in, maybe we should talk about regulatory a little bit, even in really uncertain terms in terms of regulatory framework, right? The Financial Action Task Force is posting guidelines, or they just posted guidelines this week that are pretty damning to crypto, right? They're talking about anyone interacting with a cryptocurrency network essentially has to give up, they're going to try to assert, should have to give up personal data, right? Essentially be identifiable on the network. This makes things like privacy projects potentially illegal, right? Where they're trying to criminalize behavior that's already happening. These projects, the great thing about them, though, if they're sufficiently decentralized, is that they're still untouchable. And I think that part is something that a lot of other people haven't grokked to yet either, is that when you launch a truly decentralized distributed autonomous organization, that there's no attack vector that we've been able to find on them, right? That there's no way to actually shut them down. If you could, then you could probably make a lot of money. You could go short the Bitcoin network and shut down the Bitcoin network tomorrow. You'd make billions and billions of dollars. But since no one's figured out how to do that, well, that makes it really valuable, right? And I think it'll be another decade or two before that enters into sort of a collective consciousness, this idea that you could launch information systems that are so robust and so well designed that there's no force on earth that could shut them down. Right? It's just a wild statement that is also true, right? That you could launch a distributed network that we have been unable to discover anything short of cataclysmic civilization-wide failure. Like when people start using examples of what would shut down Bitcoin, for example, or Ethereum, they always have to include some kind of thing that would also be an extinction event for mankind, right? Like if a meteor hit the planet, then what? If there's a massive electromagnetic pulse that took out every computer device on the planet, what would you do then? It's like, well, at that point, chances are I'm not worried about my Bitcoin. I'm mostly worried about, my house falling down or there being madmen roving the streets, robbing everyone. I'm not worried about the information networks, but the joke is it would also survive, right? If one copy of any distributed autonomous organization. If one node exists somewhere in a hardened location, right, that's EMP shielded, then the whole network could spool itself back up almost immediately. And that kind of survivability, that kind of immutability just hasn't existed before. People don't realize that like a lot of the things that make cryptocurrency possible are so innovative that we literally have never had anything like that in our environment before. And we don't know what that means at the market, right? That's what cryptocurrency's market rise is essentially asking us is, if you were to launch non-national digital money that can't be shut down by any force on earth, what's it worth? Right? It's an important question. And I think the market is saying it's worth trillions of dollars right now. And I think it's going to continue to trend in that direction for the rest of our lives, is what I'm saying. And that transfer of wealth is so important that we need to manage it. We need to be mindful about it, both as individuals, right? We might talk about individual portfolio management, but also as a civilization in terms of where does all this money go, right? All this new value that's being created in the crypto markets, we're talking trillions of dollars. Where does it go and why? And we haven't really asked those questions about crypto because we've been too busy making money. Right? We're all so happy with these thousands of % returns that we haven't stopped to ask the moral question of like, well, why? Why should we have access to all this capital? And now that we do, what do you want to do with it? Right? Like what's the end goal? Stick all the money in your ears and do a little dance? Or do you actually want to solve real problems? And I think as an industry, we need to galvanize and start to focus on solving real problems. And for me, that's poverty. And people think of the problem of poverty as this like out of reach thing that is just part of human nature, right? They think of it as people, there'll always be haves and have nots is kind of the narrative of the old world. And I'm here to tell you that it's just absolutely a lie. And that a hallmark of the information age is that we're going to solve poverty using advances in information science and in financial technology. And that when we do, it will seem so obvious and annoying that we won't be able to, future generations will think that we were crazy to let people starve in the streets, right? They'll think there was something fundamentally wrong with us that we let that continue. And I think in hindsight, it will look like a silly problem that we never should allow to persist, but that right now that door to solve it is open. And I intend to rush headlong through that door. And I think as an industry, crypto should also galvanize around, if not, you don't have to pick my pet project, right? You don't have to be like, I care about poverty too, but you should be trying to solve a meaningful problem in the marketplace. And ideally one that will have a net positive impact on everyday citizens, right? Hopefully, the people who need it the most, whether they're poor or middle class or, and to be clear, I'm not anti-wealth either, right? I think when you build these systems that are solving poverty, they also have to benefit the wealthy people, right? And which confuses some people, right? I'm not anti-wealth. I think people should be able to be as wealthy as they can make themselves, while at the same time, it should not be to the detriment or to the cost of those around them. It should actually benefit people around them if you've designed your economy properly. What we have now doesn't really allow for that, though. Right? What we have now is extractive in nature. We have a currency that's backed by petroleum, and then to make matters worse, we have a really bad Gini coefficient in which a very small group of people, 13 precisely, get to decide on the inflation and distribution policy of our whole economy, and that's not to our benefit. Right? Generally speaking, they tend to give money to an insider group that don't share it with the rest of the economy, and so we end up with a very stagnant economy where there's quadrillions of dollars locked up in the derivatives market, but hundreds of billions of dollars locked up in private hands that never see the light of day, right? And that's detrimental to us as a civilization and as a society. And I think we can make better choices. And opening up money as a product and viewing it in the same way we would view any other competitive marketplace opens up the possibility of solving some of these problems with gusto too, right? Like not slowly over the next couple of decades, but at the speed of the information age. And that's exciting to me, right? Because who wants to wait, right? Life is too short. I don't want to wait until the end of my lifetime to finally see that we're making headway in these problems. I want to make headway in these problems now so that we can start to tackle interesting problems. I find going to the stars or carbon sequestration to be more interesting problems than poverty, but just not more important. Right. So if anything, I think the lament of the wealthy spending the money the way they are, like going to space and what have you. I think the major lament is that their order of operations seems wrong. Right. spending hundreds of billions of dollars to spend a few minutes in space while you're also making that money off of people who are on welfare or people who are homeless, and while millions of people starve in your regional community, it just seems a bit tone deaf, right? It seems like that out of touch, and which I would imagine would happen to the wealthiest people in the world, right? So in a way, I have sympathy for them, where who knows what their life is like, right? Like, unless you've experienced it, it's probably very difficult to understand what it might be like to be Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. That being said, they do seem to be ignoring the plight of mankind around them, right? They're making funny remarks and saying, well, you show me how to solve poverty with $6 billion, which is Elon Musk, one of his recent tweets. And I think he's right. I think the people asking for money through taxation to try to say that they're going to solve these problems are not going to solve these problems. Generally speaking, the people asking for money are the ones that cause the problems. So, I don't believe that we should, be calling for more taxes or, going after this like tax the rich approach, but instead should be looking to redesign our economy from the ground up. Come up with a new inflation and distribution policy in which no one goes hungry, that no one lives below the $2 a day threshold. And what you discover is that those people get to middle class on their own, right? The moment you help people get out of extreme poverty, they're perfectly capable of making choices that benefit them from that perspective, from that moment on. And all the data suggests this, by the way. This isn't just me riffing. All the data suggests that the moment you get someone above the extreme poverty level, that they're perfectly capable of taking care of themselves. That means that the goal towards solving poverty isn't how do I get everyone to a middle class existence? It's how do I get everyone above that $2 a day threshold and then allow them to self-actualize and move themselves into a middle class existence. So that's much more eminently solvable than, how do I give $60,000 a year to every person on the planet? Versus, no, how do you give $2 a day to every person in your economic ecosystem? For example, if you were to do this properly, you would perhaps launch a social media platform. And in that social media platform, their attention and engagement would be traded for value. And if that value exceeded $2 a day or more, you could effectively say that you've created a self-sustaining UBI at that point based off of that platform's activity, and that UBI was solving poverty. So that's my life's purpose, is to build systems that do exactly that. We've got some prototype. We had our launch in October of 2020, and it went really well, but we still have a long way to go. And there's still a lot to be built, not just for my project, but for the crypto industry as a whole. Right? People think because they've seen this price action in crypto that they're late. You brought it up earlier that, you feel like, I wish I had bought Bitcoin at 14 cents. And then eventually it became, I wish I had bought Bitcoin at $1, then $100, then $1,000. Now people who bought Bitcoin at 10,000 seem really smart, right? Well, next market cycle, people buying Bitcoin even now will seem pretty smart, right? Even though we're probably going to go through a major correction sometime in the next 4 to 6 months. I would say early to mid next year, you could expect a massive fallout in the market. But even then, if you simply adopt the strategy, that macro strategy we were talking about, and take a step back, as long as you wait, chances are you're going to be okay, right? And what happens is people panic and they sell at the bottom and they lose a lot of money, and then they say, well, crypto's a scam. It's like, okay, I get why you might feel that way because you lost a lot of money. But is it a scam, or did you just fail to give it the respect it deserved? Right? Where you didn't actually take the time to understand the market you were participating in and you got burned. Well, that happens in every market, right? There are losers in every market. And I think what we need to make sure is that we're designing systems so that even when you do have losers, whether it's in this market or any other market, that it isn't life destroying would be nice, right? And I think a self-sustaining UBI kind of gets us that. So, where this goes in the future, or how big of a UBI any system create, that remains to be seen. I've seen some data on it that suggests the amount of money that you could send back to every user would be large enough to get them in the middle class. But right now, I'll settle for $2 a day. If we could create a social media-like platform that has crypto aspects, some financial technology embedded in it, and that it was the payment rails that were sending back $2 or more in value a day per user, we might say that system has solved poverty, at least temporarily, right? And now if that system was robust and sustainable and continue to grow and continue to add more users and continue to feed value back at $2 or more a day, well, we could say that system solved poverty forever, potentially, then, right? If it's truly a decentralized system and it is not something that's going to get taken down, and it's been well designed and well crafted, and it's being well managed by the community, that to me is the doorway to the future. That's what solving poverty will look like. It won't look like the government taking action, and it won't be even necessarily a private corporation like a Google or a Facebook taking action that will solve these problems. But I think it'll be community based. I think we'll see a decentralized autonomous organization with a crypto community that figures it out. And from that, we'll start to see these problems get solved. So I've seen it happen already in crypto. Like, I was there at the beginning of Ethereum. I saw Ethereum launch a platform to make unstoppable code a real thing. And now decentralized finance exists all of a sudden. And, to give anyone listening an idea how important that is, Uniswap has existed for, about a year now. And it already has, or a little bit over a year, and it already has assets under management larger than JP Morgan.
Wow.
and right, I don't think people understand the scale of what's happening. Right, human beings are not very good at like astronomical numbers, and when we start to talk about markets like the derivatives market, which crypto is disrupting, by the way, the derivatives market has somewhere between $4 and $20 quadrillion locked up in it. We never even hear these numbers, quadrillion, but like, where's all this money coming from? Right, what's going on here? But that's the amount of the notational value of the derivatives market. And it's bigger than all the other markets, all the world's real estate, all the world's cash supply, all the world's precious metals, all the world's stock combined is smaller than the derivatives market. And once you understand that, though, and most people don't understand it, but once you do understand that, you start to make sense of like, oh, well, that's how derivatives could crash the 2008 economy, right? That's how these bets that large corporations are making in these weird exotic markets are somehow dragging down the whole global economy. It's because of the scale, right? The scale is so cartoonishly disproportionate to the actual physical real world that it has off-sized impact on our lives. So crypto disrupting that game, disrupting global finance, disrupting central banking, disrupting the derivatives market, even disrupting stock markets and precious metals to some degree, is an opportunity, right? There's a transfer of wealth happening in that disruption. And by and large, when the information age disrupts your market, it's also important to recognize that it tends to make that market bigger, right? And not just a little bit bigger, but a lot bigger, right? Media and communications was the first market that the internet disrupted. And media and communications is 50 times larger today than it was before the internet. So we could expect the same kind of action to happen in banking and finance with the information age. Now, crypto is an example of the information age disrupting banking and finance. And what happens when you make banking and finance 50 times larger than it is today, right? Or even any larger than it is today? Well, that is definitely going to be the largest transfer of wealth in human history, especially if we're including the derivatives market. And when that happens, if we've chosen wisely, that money will land in the laps of ordinary Americans and ordinary global citizens, right? And my life's purpose is to make sure as much of those people as possible get access to this newly found wealth and this newfound capital. It's very easy to repeat the mistakes of the past, though, right? Like we could very much just create shinier, faster versions of what we already have. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. And I think thankfully the market is suggesting otherwise, and that we're ending up with truly innovative economic systems or financial tools that will give people or already give people access, as many people in Latin America or places like Turkey will attest. Having access to non-national digital money is a lifeline if you live in a totalitarian country, right? If you live in a world where the economic policy of the nation you live in is in alignment with your beliefs or what you want in the world, well, one of the options you have is to just sell all of your local currency and invest it instead in non-national digital money, whether it's Bitcoin or anything that has emerged as a result of Bitcoin's creation. And you could benefit from it tremendously, especially relative to what's going on in your regional economy. You know, I meet people in the United States that don't understand why you need crypto. And I'm like, well, that's because most of your life, your currency has at least had the perspective of being stable. But if you lived in Venezuela, you might have a different story, right? Or if you lived in Argentina, or if you were living in Greece when they had the economic lockdowns and suddenly you could only get $40 a day out of the bank, suddenly crypto makes a lot more sense if you were in those markets. And that's generally why we see adoption in those markets be much higher than they are in the United States. So the thing I often have to tell people in the United States is like, it'll get around to you eventually. Eventually, you'll figure out why this is for you, and you'll show up. The fancy saying is the future doesn't show up everywhere at once. It shows up in individuals and radiates outwards. And so the thing I always have to explain to people is that I just live a little bit in the future. Just like I'm a market cycle or two in the future compared to most people, right? In 2 or 3 market cycles, everyone will say, well, of course, non-national digital money on a fixed supply makes sense, right? Then suddenly they'll get it too. And I look forward to that day. But between now and then, you got to ask yourself, where in that gradient do you find yourself? Are you all the way in the future? Do you have 1 foot in, 1 foot out? I went all in, right? I was a crazy person, and in like 2013, I just put everything in I was saving my rent money as crypto, right? Like 100% of my wealth, and that made all the difference for me personally. I timed it right. I was in the right place at the right time. I made whatever aggressive moves I could make, and I benefited from it. There are people doing that right now this cycle. And those are going to be the next round of entrepreneurs, right? Every time we have a market cycle like this, where we have a big bull market and there's billions and billions of dollars made, there's a whole round of new entrepreneurs that emerge from that. And every cycle, we see more and more exciting things emerge as a result. I think decentralized finance couldn't have existed without the value created in the market cycle before it, right? Without Ethereum, you don't get Uniswap, right? So what happens now that you have Ethereum and you have Uniswap? What emerges next cycle? Right, we're going to have decentralized loans that are actually sensible and rational. We're going to have decentralized financial instruments, decentralized ownership, certificates of ownership, whether it's your car or your house or whatever. Right, I think all these things are going to happen on a long enough timeline. The question we got to ask, though, is the why. Why should anyone care? Why are we participating in this, or why are you participating in it? And if your why is rational and sensible, and hopefully includes the well-being of others around you, well, I think you end up with a better civilization, or at the very least, a better life, right? If nothing else, I could attest that switching to non-national digital money, even as a first world participant, has been tremendously beneficial to my life, right? And when people see that, that's when engagement starts, right? That's when people see what my lifestyle is like, or what I've been able to accomplish simply because I moved into the crypto economy. Obviously, they want to get involved too. So my main thing now is just making sure that they get involved in a meaningful way. That when they come to me asking, how do I make 300% returns on the latest meme coin, then instead I start to have a meaningful conversation about what comes next, about why they should care or not.
Yeah, that's very well said. 2 questions for you. Curious to learn about the Anatha Taurus, and also why you chose the Cosmos Tendermint blockchain.
Yeah, well, the Anatha Taurus is a series of smart contracts that do what I've been saying this whole time. It gives money back to the end users, right? It allows the network to take control over a portion of the economic activity of the platform, and then it has a distribution policy. Think of it as like the monetary policy of the Anatha ecosystem. And part of that monetary policy is that it gives 50% of everything it generates back to end users. If the United States did this, by the way, it would mean every man, woman, and child in the United States would make about $1,200 a day. I mean, $1,200 a month, not a day. I wish it was a day. $1,200 a month, which would completely end poverty within our borders, right? If every time the Fed Reserve printed money, it gave 50% of that money back to the end user, us, everyone in the United States, every man, woman, and child would make $1,200 a month for their entire lives. Right. And I think that would be at current funding levels for the United States government. So that's something that I can't force the US government into doing. I mean, I wish I could force them, but instead I designed my own economic ecosystem that did that instead. So that's what the Anatha Taurus is. And the reason we chose Cosmos ecosystem is their focus on interoperability. We understand that the future is decentralized, that unlike we're not maximalist, right? We're not saying that in the future, everyone should use one currency and it's going to be Bitcoin or it's going to be Ethereum. We're saying that in the future, there are going to be an ocean of currencies, millions of them, and that we need to learn to navigate them and build the tools that allow us to navigate them. And that the best way to do that is going to be through interoperability by making these things one big meta system, right? In the Cosmos perspective, the cryptocurrency is not many different ecosystems, but rather one large ecosystem that we're still building the pipes between. And Cosmos is focused on building pipes or specifically bridges in a lot of cases between different projects. And that excites me. That's why we decided to build there, because we have this kind of pantheistic perspective on what network is valid. We chose Cosmos, and we're not married to Cosmos, I should add, that we're network agnostic, right? Like if in the future we have to do a migration, we will. But for now, I think Cosmos is doing some really exciting things. I think the Osmosis platform that just launched is worth paying attention to. I think it's one of the best AMMs or decentralized exchanges I've seen yet, both in terms of design and utility. So I'm really happy that exists. I'm really happy to see that the Cosmos ecosystem is growing and emerging into something interesting. But there are plenty of others, right? Right now, no one will shut up about Solana or Algorand, and those are great communities. I think Solana has some concerns around its inflation and distribution policy right now. Specifically, people are finding accounts with millions of tokens in them, and I don't know what the validity of those claims are, if those are burnt tokens or if they actually should be counted as being part of the circulation or not. But attack vectors like that are still being worked out, right? There are a lot of things in the industry, a lot of ecosystems that are good enough for now, but probably not where we'll land on in the future. And that's true for both Anatha, and I think that's true for us as an industry as a whole, is that all the systems you see now, for better or for worse, will likely not be here in the future. Or at least if they are here in the future, they're going to be so wildly transformative, or they have to go through so many transitions or iterations that you won't be able to recognize them. And so, yes, we're in Cosmos now, but we're not married, I guess is the long way of saying that. Is just that we're willing to migrate to whatever ecosystem gets our end users the most benefit. And we're also capable of doing that. Network migrations are a skill, and it's something that you do over and over until eventually you get good at it. And I'm confident that my team could pull that off. We could build in other ecosystems, but for now, Cosmos has certainly been fertile soil for us.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, I like Cosmos. I think it's a pretty good option. I think you chose wisely there. I was looking around on your website the other day, and something that really interests me, but I've never been able to do, is actually setting up a node on a network. How difficult is that on Anatha?
Oh, we have some pretty straightforward instructions, and people have been able to do it without, bothering us too much. So, it must be viable. I did it pretty straightforward, but I also had help, right? I have a whole team of people helping me and looking over my shoulder whenever I do anything. We do have a great community though. And if you were to go into the community and say, hey, I want to run a node, there's dozens of people who would emerge and say, hey, let me help you, walk you through that process. It's not so different from launching a node on any delegated proof of stake system. You need to have enough tokens available. Specifically, in our case, 500,000 Anatha. You have to be willing to bond, and then you could run a node, right? And there's no guarantee that you'll be one of the official validators, but there is a waiting list, and the waiting list is not that long, and nodes fall off all the time. Sometimes just due to normal network activity. Sometimes a node will be jailed or fall off, and it'll allow you an opportunity to move up. So if you wanted to run a node in our ecosystem, and I would advise doing so only if you really believe in what we're doing and you want to get behind it. Node operators are kind of like the power users of any cryptocurrency, right? If you want to be an Anatha power user and you want to jump in with a node, you might want to have a certain degree of technical savvy, but B, you're going to want to join the community, right? And start having conversations with other node operators about what they're doing and figure out what's the best way to do so. But it's really not that hard.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just keep dreaming for now. I won't have 500,000 tokens anytime soon. But there's also other plans I saw, like supporter, believer, and organizer. If you wouldn't mind real briefly kind of running me through those.
Yeah, we're just trying to figure out what are the different tiers of users, right? So there's people who will just want to register an HRA, start receiving a little bit amount of money, and maybe making some use of our functionality, right? When we have chat turned on, maybe they'll just use their HRA to chat with people in our ecosystem, or at least with people that they're going to send money to, right? But there are power users. There are people who may want to seek out many domains, or they may want to launch a tool that has human readable addresses as part of it, and you want to use our registry as the human readable address registry of choice, well, then they might want a lot more, right? Versus buying, like $100 worth, they might need hundreds of thousands of dollars worth, depending on the scale of the project they're working on. And a lot of cases, when people are interested at that level, they end up coming to talk to us anyway. And we start talking about strategic partnerships and integration. And so we're certainly willing to help if anyone wanted to be at that level. But of course, there's the level that you mentioned, which is a node operator, which you need about 500,000. But a power user may even need more, right? Like if you plan on registering millions of users and you don't want the user to have to actually buy the Anatha token to do the human readable address registry name, you have to, as a developer, have to have those tokens on hand, which is sensible in some cases, because if you measure the cost of trying to set up your own name registry and making it omniversal, and then having to worry about building an interface and the APIs and getting a network running, the cost is much higher than the cost of the tokens, right? To provide that utility. So there is a cost savings for app developers who want to use our system, but that's not necessarily what I try to focus on. It's certainly not something I'm out proselytizing people should do. Mostly, we're just trying to create opportunities for people to get involved at whatever level they feel they want to be involved in, right? It's an open community. It's permissionless. It's not my job to determine how people participate, but as a member of the community, I want to help people figure out where they fit in, right? And so when you see these different levels, mostly we're just trying to address the different levels in the market of participation. But usually people come to me individually and say, hey, I want to be a node operator, or hey, I want to be a contributor, or I want to write applications that touch your APIs. Like, what should I do? And we take that on a case-by-case basis. I think the same way you would do in any real community, right? I think this sometimes throws people off, is that I treat the community at Project Anatha as my actual community, people who I talk to on a regular basis and who I become friends with and who I stay in touch with, across great distances. I think that makes for a better community. I think we have a really healthy one that has, we talk about things that I think are at least important to me or important to human civilization, versus the standard crypto talk is like, when's it going up 100%? When moon is the normal conversation around crypto. And we do our best to steer away from that kind of conversation, right? Instead, we focus on utility and functionality and the things that we could actually build that are going to help people in the community. And that to me is much more fun. And I do like allowing the community to steer us to some degree, right? That is also, I think, an important distinction is if you're a power user, if I see that you have a node and you come and have a conversation with me about the future of Project Anatha, I'm obviously like, I should listen to you, right? You're a power user. Why wouldn't I listen to you? So a lot of people who believe in what we're doing, that's how they express that belief, right? They spool up a node or they buy a ton of tokens, and then it opens up a dialogue in which we start working together. So how people show up, though, and at what level is ultimately up to them. I just hope people are listening, right? If not to Project Anatha, then to the industry as a whole, to crypto as a whole. I just hope that people are finally paying attention, because this happens every market cycle. Is people fall in love with crypto when it's a bull market, and then they fall out of love when it's a bear market. And I think they're making a huge mistake by doing that. I think the bear market is perhaps more important, because that's when you build. And that's when you need a community to say, hey, let's get together and build something for the next bull market that will be meaningful and actually move the needle and help us get closer to our goal of solving global poverty. Some of the best ideas, though, have come from the community. And I love having it available.
Yeah, very good. Man, Ed, I really enjoyed talking with you today. I think that there's just so much potential, and it's really encouraging hearing you speak. I think that you've got the right intention, and I'm definitely excited to see where it goes. Love to talk to you again sometime if you would like.
Yeah, I'm more than happy to babble at you about crypto whenever you ask, Ethan.
It's fun. It's fun, man. And you've got a good insight. So
yeah, I'm in that sector where people might think I'm a little crazy, right? Oh, you're giving away money, right? It sounds like a crazy thing. And I just think that always been available, just staring right in front of us. It just seemed impossible because we can't force the Federal Reserve or our government to adopt these policies, right? We can't say, hey, create a universal basic income tomorrow. I demand it, right? I wish it was that easy, but I think that we have the opportunity to build the kind of solutions that we wished had always existed. And to me, that is certainly a life worth pursuing, and it makes the crypto industry wildly fascinating, and certainly gets me out of bed in the morning, right? So, thank you so much for having me, Ethan. Hopefully, some of the information I've offered or some of the stuff I've babbled about has been rational or useful for some people. But if anyone has any questions, or if anyone wants me to unpack anything further, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Just stop by our website at anatha.io and shoot us an email, or stop by our Telegram community, or our subreddit, or our Facebook, or whatever it is that you want to use to reach out. We are listening, and we do care. And we do value our community. So, if anyone's out there listening to me right now and you think I said something that's wrong, or there's an area that you want me to unpack further, please feel free to reach out. I am an open book. This is my life's purpose. So, if you want me to come back, Ethan, maybe we could have another Q&A at any time. You just say when.
Yeah, it sounds good. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you today. Thank you again.
Awesome, Ethan. It's been a pleasure. Aloha. Have a good one, everyone.